Okay, we are going to be doing our lesson 3.1 notes here in this video, and the main focus of this video is going to be looking at angle pairs formed by three intersecting lines. So a lot of our work over the next several class periods and some of the videos in the future are going to be having to deal with the three intersecting lines. I would like you to use a pencil for this activity here that you're doing, and also make sure that you write down the learning target, please. The learning target: I can identify angle pairs formed by three intersecting lines. As you see on your note sheet, there's a lot of new vocabulary, so as you've been building your vocabulary in geometry, I hope that you're becoming more familiar with all the different figures and diagrams, and I know it's a lot, but you're doing great, and just keep up the hard work that you're doing. So it is important that you're listening to the audio, not just fast forwarding through the video. Make sure you hear all the details about what does each one of these vocabulary words mean, and sometimes I give some examples that are helpful to your understanding of each of the vocabulary terms. At the bottom of the page, you should have some space to write any questions that you might have during the video, and if you have any questions that you'd like to ask at the beginning of class, please make sure that you do that. So to begin, we'd like to discuss parallel lines and how those differ from skew lines. So parallel lines are lines in the same plane. Notice that they are coplanar and they do not intersect. Okay, so they have the same distance between them in terms of how far apart they are. The distance between them is the same. Now there's a special mark that we put on lines that are parallel, and you'll see this in many of the drawings, well, any drawing really that is representing parallel lines. They're just little arrows. Okay, so these little arrows like this indicate that those two lines are parallel. And skew lines are lines that do not intersect but are not coplanar. Okay, so that means, for instance, in a box, some kind of a, see if we can, okay, back to our new vocabulary. The new vocabulary, we have four more angle pairs that we're going to be learning about in this next section. So this transversal is a line that intersects two or more coplanar lines at different points. Okay, so if you can imagine two lines and then a line that intersects the other two lines. So the line that we would call the transversal would be this one here, because it's the one that intersects the two or more coplanar lines. So if I had, more lines than that, 4 or 5 lines, that's still the transversal because it's intersecting two or more lines at different points. All right, so we're going to have 4 new sets of angle pairs to remember. The first one is going to be corresponding angles, and we can abbreviate corresponding angles with just the letters CA. Okay, those are the two angles that have the same corresponding positions in a set of lines that intersect like that. So we're going to get into the details in just a moment. We also have the alternate interior angles. Alternate interior angles, I usually just abbreviate AIA, so we don't have to write it all out each time. These are the ones that lie between the two lines and on opposite sides of the transversal. I'm going to draw a picture of this in just a moment to kind of clarify what we're talking about. And then we have the alternate exterior angles, and I usually abbreviate that with AEA, again, just so we don't have to write it all out each time. And these are the angles that lie outside the two lines, but on opposite sides of the transversal. So the word opposite and the word alternate. Okay, if you can remember, the word opposite just means kind of a replacement word for the word alternate. Okay, and then we have the consecutive interior angles. These are the CIA angles, and these happen to equal 180 degrees when you add their measures up. So CIA angles are supplementary, and that's going to be something that we're going to be using all the way until the end of our course. So we want to keep that in mind. So let's go ahead and look at a picture. At the bottom of our note sheet, we do have a couple of postulates. Postulates, remember, are just things that we have to believe are true. There's not a proof for them, but we just accept them to be true statements of geometry. So if there's a line, this is the parallel postulate, if there's a line and a point not on the line. So let's go ahead and draw this. A line and a point not on the line. Okay, here's my point not on the line. Then there is only exactly one line through that point that is parallel to the given line. So I cannot draw any other parallel lines besides the one that I'm drawing here through that point that is not on the line. So these two lines now are parallel, and there's no other line that exists through this particular point that is parallel to the line. Now if there's a different point, let's say there's a different point over here, then there's a different parallel line that one, can have that goes through it. But only one line goes through each point that's not on the line and still is parallel to the line that we began with. So we also have a perpendicular postulate. The perpendicular postulate states something similar. If there's a line and a point not on the line, so here's my line, and I'll just say here's my point not on the line, then there's only exactly one line that goes through the point and is perpendicular to the given line. Perpendicular means creates a 90-degree angle to the line. So that point that's not on the line there, I have one line that is perpendicular to the line that we started with. Just one. There can't be a different one, because if we go through this point, we could go at an angle to the line, but there's only just this one that is going to be exactly perpendicular. And it would be great if you could write some questions in the box at the bottom there. If you have any questions about what has been discussed in this video, just simple questions or maybe more complex questions, those can be asked at the beginning of class. So let's go on to the next page of our notes. There is one last thing I want to add to our notes here at the bottom of the page. The new symbol that we want to remember for the word parallel is going to be two lines next to each other, just short little lines like this. The new symbol for parallel looks like this. Okay, two lines next to each other, kind of extended letter L's that look parallel to each other. Sometimes you'll see them drawn on a slant like this, but that's our new symbol. Sort of like we have a symbol for angle, and sort of like we have, symbols that go over certain figures like a ray or a line. So this is a new symbol for the word parallel. We're going to go ahead and turn our paper over to look at the example problems now. So when I have two lines, okay, and then I'm going to draw my transversal in red just so you're aware that that is called the transversal. If I have, let's just talk about a position. So we're going to talk about the corresponding angles. Okay, corresponding angles are the ones that are lying on the same side of the transversal, and they're in the same position. So let's just put an X where we have a corresponding angle. So those are just an example of one pair of corresponding angles. All right, I could also have corresponding angles, let's say this and this are corresponding angles. Notice that they're on the same side of the transversal and they're in the same position, the upper right corner of the intersection of those two lines. I could also say that this one here, I'm just going to put a number 2, is also a corresponding angle to that angle there. So just get used to the idea that corresponding angles are on the same side of the transversal and they are in the same position. Okay, so the same position meaning in the intersection they're either in the upper right, upper left, or lower right, but they have two that match. Okay, and those are going to be congruent angles as well. All right, so that's going to be something that we just have to kind of memorize. Another new angle pair that we're discussing in this video is the set of alternate interior angles. Okay, when we talk about interior, we're talking about between the two lines. Okay, so the interior is going to be in here, in between these two. And the word alternate, remember, means opposite. Okay, so they're on the opposite sides of the red transversal line. Opposite sides of the transversal. And they're inside the purple lines. So we want to take a look at a couple sets here. So this angle right here is inside of the purple lines, and then this angle right here is, and these angles are on opposite sides of the transversal. So these two angles we considered alternate interior angles. And as long as you see a arrow drawn on these, we would have to believe that these lines are parallel. When the lines are parallel, these alternate interior angles are congruent. Okay, so we can also think of these as congruent angles if the lines that they're in between are parallel. All right, a third set of angle pairs that we're going to look at here are the AEA, which is alternate exterior angles. Exterior just means that they are outside of the parallel lines. Notice that I did put the arrows on here, which means that the purple lines are parallel. Exterior just means that they're not between them, they're outside of the. All right, so alternate exterior, alternate again means the opposite sides. So opposite from this angle is this angle. Remember, they have to be outside of the purple lines, or the ones that are parallel. So these are a set of alternate exterior, and then I could also say that this angle and this angle are a set of alternate exterior angles as well. And the final set of new angle pairs that we're dealing with are going to be the CIA. Those are the consecutive. Now that's a new word that we haven't really talked about. Consecutive just means that they are following one another. So the numbers 1, 2, and 3 are consecutive. The numbers 17, 18, and 19 are consecutive. So they're following each other in some kind of order. And when we're talking about interior, remember interior are the ones that are between the lines that we have marked parallel here. And they are going to be on the same side of the transversal. So there's a couple things that you're going to just want to remember about each type of angle set that we're talking about. Same side of transversal, and remember the transversal is the red line in my drawing here. All right, so the angles that we're talking about would be this angle, angle 1, and angle 2. Those are consecutive interior angles. They're right one after another. And one thing that you're going to want to remember is that these angles add up to 180. Okay, so angles 3 and angle 4 are also consecutive interior angles. They fall between the purple lines and they follow one another. And again, these are angles that add up to 180 degrees. Kind of explain what skew lines are. So skew lines, if I draw a cube, and let's imagine that this is a classroom with a ceiling and a floor. Okay, so here's the corner. Here's another corner. Okay, so I have my square, my cube. It's not perfect, but you can understand that if I shade this area here would be the ceiling. Okay, and then the part down here is going to be the floor. So if this was our classroom, the dotted space here is the floor, and then the shaded in area is the ceiling. While skew lines are lines that do not intersect. Okay, so at no point will they touch each other, but they're not in the same plane. All right, so imagine this line here, okay, and a line that does not intersect with that line. So it could be this line over here, right? It's not in the same plane, and it certainly isn't going to intersect with the line that I drew initially. Another one that will not intersect and it's not in the same plane is this one here. Will not intersect with our original one. So let me just put a number 1. This is the one that we're always referring to here. So the lines that I'm drawing are never going to intersect because this one is much, at the ceiling of our classroom. This one here is at the base of our classroom. So you can see that these lines will never intersect because they don't have, that there is enough distance between them that they're not going to intersect. So that's what skew lines are. Parallel lines do exist in the same plane. So if we drew another shape, like a box like this, we should be able to identify some parallel lines as well. Parallel lines, like I said, do exist in the same plane. So this line here and this line here are parallel. They're never going to intersect because the distance between the lines is always going to be the same. And sometimes we can say that the slope of the lines is the exact same. Okay, so parallel are in the same plane. Skew are not in the same plane, but they're never going to intersect. Example 1 asks us to identify relationships in space. So we need to think of each segment in the diagram as part of a line. So let's assume that the segment doesn't end where it shows in the diagram, but it continues on. Which lines in the diagram appear to fit the description for this one parallel to line AB? So here's line AB, and it continues on. Remember, that's what it said in the directions. So let's think of this as the one that we're comparing to. And parallel would mean that it has to be in the same plane, but it does not intersect. Okay, so AB is on this floor of the pyramid, and a line that would not intersect with it would be this line. Okay, notice that it's the same distance apart from the purple line all the way down the line there. And so I think that really is the only one. We could name it CD, or we could name it DC, but it still is going to be the segment or the line, since they ask us to think about it as part of a line. That's the only one that I see that would be parallel. Okay, what about for the next one? It says skew to AB. Skew means that it does not intersect and it is not on the same plane. So it cannot intersect with that purple line, and it cannot be on the same plane. So any of these that are on this plane down here at the bottom, we cannot choose any of those. But we could choose this one here at the back, I'm not sure, is that ED there? That goes down this way. The other one that we could use would be EC. Okay, that one's never going to intersect because it's going to be too far away from that purple line. So it looks like to me we have EC would work, and then also ED would work. Okay, they're not touching the purple line and they are not in the same plane. So parallel to BC, so if we look at BC, let me draw this in, let's say, a different color so we can see it a little bit better. Let's do it in blue. So BC is the line that we're going to be comparing to. And so any lines that are not going to touch it but are going to be in the same plane, so that would have to be this one. Okay, I think I drew it a little bit off, but you can see that that one's never going to intersect with BC, so I think that is AD is going to be parallel. Parallel, again, remember that just means that it does not intersect, but it is on the same plane. It is coplanar. All right, so you're going to be doing the problems that say on your own practice, so that's going to be numbers 1, 2, 3, and 4, and then 5, 6, 7, and 8. Please do what they're asking you here in terms of perpendicular, parallel, skew. You should have those definitions on the front side of your page. And then I'm going to do example number 2, identify angle relationships. So we need to identify all pairs of angles of the given type. So remember, corresponding angles are on the same side of the transversal. Okay, and then they're also in the same position. So they could be upper left, upper right, lower left, lower right. So if we look at angle 1 is in the upper left, okay, of the intersection here. So which one goes with angle 1? Angle 3. So we say angle 1 and angle 3 are corresponding. All right, and then we could say that angle 8 has a corresponding relationship with angle 6 because it's in the upper right as well. So 8 and 6. And then it looks like 2 is in relationship correspondingly with 4. And then finally we have angles 7 and 5. 7 corresponds with 5 because it's again on the same side of the transversal but in the same position, lower right. Okay, alternate interior angles are, the word alternate, just as a reminder, means opposite. Okay, and the word interior is inside, so these are the interior angles in here. So angle 2 is going to be the same, well, I'm sorry, it's going to have the alternate interior relationship with angle 6. Okay, and then the alternate, there's one other pair actually here. It's angle 3 and angle 7. Those two have alternate interior angle relationships. We just abbreviate these AIA, and that's easier than writing it out. So alternate exterior angles are the ones that have the outside, okay, these outside, but alternate means that they are on the opposite sides of the transversal. So if you look at angle 1 is outside and angle 5 is outside. Okay, and those are alternate because they're on opposite sides of the transversal. So 1 and 5. And that also means then that angle 8 is outside and angle 4 is outside. So 4 and 8 are alternate exterior. Okay, consecutive interior. Again, interior angles are inside these lines that are, they look parallel, but they're not quite parallel, so they didn't put the arrows on them. But interior means they're between those lines. And I don't remember what the numbers were because I got them covered up, but I think 2 and 3, this is 2, this is 3. These two angles are going to be considered consecutive interior, and these are the ones that add up to 180 degrees. And then we also have a set of consecutive interior angles over here, and those were, I think, let's see, 6 and 7. I believe those were the numbers that were on there before I colored them in. So again, if you have questions, please make sure you write them down on the front side of the page, and we'll be doing lots of practice in class.